Welcome to Exploring Consciousness, where science meets spirituality and the inner world becomes the most exciting frontier. I am Alina Redenciuc, and today we dive deep into the lucid dreaming and out-of-body journeys with one of the world's most respected explorers of consciousness, Luigi Sciambarella. His background in psychology, hypnosis, and energy work meets decades of personal experiences with altered states.
Thank you, Alina. Lovely to be here.
So, Luigi, what made you become a lucid dreaming practitioner?
Oh, big question. Do you want the long or the short answer?
Any of those?
Okay. I got interested in psychology because I just became very, very curious about consciousness from an early age. I had an experience where I saw my dead grandmother, and that was when I was 7 years old. And that made me very, very curious about what those boundary states between waking and dreaming were, and what you could access when you consciously explore those territories. So I became interested in psychology. I studied it, and hoping that I would find answers to my early experience and how it would be possible, maybe now in the time that I've had the experience, that there's going to be research on it, that others will have found access in the mainstream, maybe parapsychology has something to say, but I found very, very little. So I detoured while doing my psychology undergraduate into hypnosis. And that was a complete coincidence or synchronistic experience, I suppose, because I started to then use hypnosis to go into very, very deep trance states in an exploratory way. And so I would spend pretty much every day in deep trance for a few hours a day in one of the labs at Manchester University. And from that, I started to have spontaneous out-of-body experiences. And this would happen usually at like 3 in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning. And I would find myself becoming conscious of like a vibrational state in the body. It felt like a train was going through me. It was a really strong vibration. And I didn't know what that was, but I thought it's part of whatever's going on with the hypnosis. So I wanted to find out more about it, and I came across the work of Robert Monroe, and I read Journeys Out of the Body, and in that he talks about the vibrational state. So this was my first exposure to the Monroe Institute and to the work of Bob Monroe, but also how it tied into my experience. And I quickly found the out-of-body experience to be I don't know if this is going to sound a bit weird. I found it to be quite limited in terms of what I was experiencing, because I was going out of body at 3 in the morning and everyone was asleep. And so I'm in my room, it's dark, and I can sometimes see my body in bed, sometimes I can't. Now what? And there's nobody else around. Even students are asleep at that time. So I didn't know what to do. And I'd walk around the hallway and calling guides, tried that, nothing. So my guides are Southern Italian old men playing cards, they're not listening at that time. So I thought, okay, what else can I do here? And almost by accident, I learned to move from the out-of-body state into the lucid dream. So rather than being kind of outside of my head, I went into my head. And so when I did that, then, and I know a lot of people do it the other way around. They go from a lucid dream to an out of body. I did it the other way because I got quickly bored. And when I went into a lucid dream, then I found that everything in the environment was a part of me. And that became a lot more interesting. So I started to work with dreams in a more directed way at that point. So yeah, I was probably about sort of 18, 19 years old, something like that at the time when I first started lucid dreaming.
For those listeners who do not know what is an out-of-body experience, could you please explain what is an out-of-body experience and what is a lucid dreaming experience?
Sure. And I pause here because the definitions are varied. The classic out-of-body experience.
Perception. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it's changed over time as well. The classic out-of-body experience is a psychological event where you as an observer have the experience of somehow perceiving beyond your physical body's boundary. So you typically, this would be that you would be, say, lying in bed, because typically it happens when people are asleep. And then there would be some sort of separation, like an energy duplicate separating from the physical. And then you would be able to perceive from that energy duplicate your environment. Sometimes you would be able to look back in your bed and see your physical body asleep there. That's the classic. But there's variants on it. And before I go into the variants, I'll tell you what a lucid dream is. More people have those. So with the outer body, it can be 10 to 15% of the population, although I think a lot of those are pulled into the lucid dream category, so I'll come to that. Lucid dreaming is a dream where you know you're dreaming while it's happening. So typically we're in dreams and we have a perspective and we're operating in an environment that kind of looks like this. Not an interview, but, physical reality in some way. And then you realize, you go, hold on a minute. I was going to bed a moment ago, and now I'm in this reality. What's happened? So you go, oh, it must be a dream. And so you are aware that you're dreaming while it's still happening. So this isn't just a very vivid dream. Unfortunately, the term lucid dreaming implies that it's a really clear or vivid dream. It's not just that. It's that you know you're dreaming in real time. So that's one thing. Now, coming back to the outer body, there are many ways of having outer body experiences. And this is why at the Monroe Institute, we have what's called the OBE spectrum. And Bob Monroe, who popularized the term outer body experience, he wasn't the one who came up with the term. That was Tyrrell in 1920 something in his book Apparitions. But Bob Monroe and Charles Tart, Professor Charles Tart, who worked with Bob, popularized the term because Bob wrote Journeys Out of the Body, and he used that term out of body experience in that. And for him, it started as the classic, or at least that's what it looks like it started as, because it's not always. His first out of body experience sounds like the classic, but he doesn't talk about actually peeling out. He just finds himself on the ceiling, right? So he saw himself in bed, but he appeared on the ceiling immediately. And that's really how it developed afterwards. So in his next two books, Far Journeys and Ultimate Journey, he uses what's called the phasing model of consciousness. And for those of you that don't know, Bob Monroe was a businessman. He worked in radio. He made his fortune in radio, broadcasting and productions. And he wasn't at all interested in anything like out-of-body experience. He didn't even know what it was. And it wasn't a particularly religious guy. Grew up in a very secular family, actually. And he was interested in radio, and sleep learning was something that came up on his radar of things to explore. And he started to experiment with different sounds that could help people to fall asleep. That's the short story. And from that, because he was the primary guinea pig, he started to have spontaneous out-of-body experiences. So this was happening in the late 50s. So this was really not something that it's like now you can read about out-of-body experiences all over the place. And from that, he set up a research division, and that became eventually the Monroe Institute, and teaching people how to have these expanded states experiences. So why do I tell you this? Because the understanding changed through that research. First, it's the classic peel out of body. But then, because he worked in radio, he started to use what a radio analogy for exploring different states of consciousness. And imagine that, right now, this is channel 1, physical reality. Then we're so used to being in channel 1 that we don't really know how to consciously turn the dial too much. And sometimes we know how to do that when we go to sleep, right? You have to turn the dial away from conscious waking reality to fall asleep in the first place. So that's another channel. But there's many possibilities and channels in between. And some of these lead to lucid dreams, out-of-body experiences, but even things like remote viewing experiences, like precognitive experiences even, where you are aware of your physical body and at the same time aware of something else happening in another reality or another sort of expanded reality. So it's not happening through your physical senses. And that doesn't fit at all with the classic out-of-body experience. When you talk very absolute, then you have to kind of explain, where does the soul live in the body, for instance? And to me, that, those kind of questions are mistaken. That's how your left hemisphere logic tries to make sense and fragment reality, but that's not what's happening at all. What's happening right now, just using that radio analogy, is that all of these realities are available to us all the time, right now. And just like radio stations, they're all playing right now. And because we're tuned into channel 1, we don't perceive the other ones. Much like a radio, if you're tuned into radio 1, you're not going to hear radio 2, 3, and 4. That doesn't mean that you have to leave, in any sort of physical sense, radio 1 to make radio 2 happen, or radio 3. So you say, how does radio 2 come out of radio 1? It doesn't work like that. You just turn the dial, you tune in, you attend to another channel. So when you fall asleep, you don't have to leave your physical body in order to enter the dream world. You don't have to leave your physical body in order to enter deep sleep. You're just changing what you're focusing on, what you're tuning into. Figure ground, right? There's always a background and there's always something in the foreground. And that's what you're moving through when we move through other realities. So in a big way, as you can tell, this answer is a pretty big one. The out-of-body experience is a spectrum of experiences. And at any one time, you can be a little bit or massively aware of your physical body. And when you're really not aware of your physical body, then we call that the classic. When you're by degrees aware of your body and also another reality, we might call that a bilocation or another form of out-of-body. So, it gets complicated, and that's why we teach programs on it, because you need to know the territory in stages, essentially.
And both of them seem to have in common the fact that one is aware, one is conscious and aware of these experiences. So he or she can control these experiences to a certain degree. Yes?
Sort of. I'm going to play devil's advocate, because when you're out of body or even in a lucid dream, you don't have to control the whole environment. And if you do, you say, like, I want to be on the beach, and you're at the beach, but you didn't create the sand, you didn't create the surf, you didn't create the birds or the sky or the people there, right? So what you can do is you can control consciously, you can control your awareness, what you're attending to within that environment in any of these states of consciousness, but you don't necessarily control the environment itself. So think, there's a beautiful analogy by Robert Wagner, who's an excellent lucid dreamer. And he says it's more like a sailor on the sea. You don't control the waves, you don't control the sea itself, but you can control the actions within the boat, as it were. And that's really how we navigate, because the vastness of these territories is far greater than what you can consciously control. So maybe surrender control, but pay attention to how you attend and how you relate to that environment as well.
What are some of the myths related to out-of-body or lucid dreaming experiences?
Oh, there's loads. I'll pick the biggest ones. When you go out of body, you can't get back. You get stuck in this expanded state. And you'll see in forums online people worrying about this. You'll see it come up in Reddit forums repeatedly. What if I get out and I can't get back? I always joke, your bladder will bring you back. You'll need to visit the bathroom, right? Your bodily functions will bring you back. And, when we teach programs at the Institute, we joke with people, but we're also serious. We say, go into the meditation by way of the bathroom. Because if you've got a full bladder, it can interrupt your experience, right? So that's one thing. You'll always come back. Your body will bring you back. You'll need to eat. You'll need to visit the bathroom. You'll need to drink. I've never come across anybody who's stayed out permanently. Nobody's left a note saying, I'm going out of body. I might not come back. If I get stuck, tell the others. That does not happen. Does not happen. You'll always come back. And it's because he's tuning into radio stations. So you don't have to leave your body in order to go to these places. That's what it feels like. That might be your subjective experience, but actually you're tuning into a wider reality where some part of you is already there. You don't have to leave your body to go into a dream and worry if you're going to come back into your physical body. The same thing. I'm not saying they're the same state, or the same subjective experience, but just the same idea that you move into one reality and then back again. The other things are that when you go out of body, somebody can take over your physical body. Again, you're not actually leaving your physical body, even though it feels like that. So there's nobody to come in, So the invasion of the body snatchers type idea goes out the window straight away. You do you. You do you. Don't worry about that. But, again, sometimes people feel uncomfortable leaving their physical body. Bob Monroe certainly did. So he started to use, mental tools like surrounding himself with a field of protective energy and things like that, just to help center himself so that he felt safer. But it's a psychological tool rather than an actual protection that you need. And I know the systems talk about that, but I've been doing out-of-body experiences now for, coming up to about 25 years consistently. And I've never had that problem. Never. Somebody trying to come and snatch my body or come into it. Never had that problem. And I have them pretty regularly. At least phasing experiences, I have them pretty regularly. And it's not about boasting. It's just to say, where's the problem? And I think sometimes because we're going into thought responsive environments, and what I mean by that is there's nothing in your physical senses constraining the experience. So your mind can kind of project as well as receive. Mm-hmm. And because of that, if you are really full of fears, you can kind of project them into the state. And sometimes they emerge. So the thought forms, the things that come from feeling, and then there's an ominous presence in the environment. That doesn't mean there's a bad thing. It's just your own fear projected into the environment. So this is why it's quite useful, not because you need to protect yourself, but actually because you need to prepare your mind to remain calm when you're going into unknown territory so that you don't blast off in all directions with your own anxieties and fears. So that is something that can happen. You can scare yourself. You can be afraid of your own shadow. Bob Monroe certainly did that. In the first half of Journeys Out of the Body, he's terrified of a lot of things. And he dedicates a whole chapter to fear about halfway through the book. And a lot of what he's saying in that chapter to fear is, I was afraid of my own shadow. I didn't recognize that those feared objects were me, parts of me, projected into a thought responsive environment. So, it's kind of a myth that, you could encounter bad things. But it's actually, there's a little bit of truth in that it's not that you encounter bad things, you encounter things that you are putting out there unconsciously, and then you're afraid of that. Other things, to do with dreaming, maybe more like if you hear your name in the dream, you wake up. Not a problem saying your name in the dream. You can't read in a dream. It's harder, but it's possible as well. mathematics and things that typically would involve a lot more sort of left hemisphere processing. It can be a little bit slow, but the dream can be pretty consistent, you know. So, and then other things like, yeah, I mean, it's usually to do with being stuck and things like that. I mean, you know, it comes back to being able to just relax into the experience and finding that eventually your body will bring you back because you need the bathroom or need to eat or the alarm goes off or something like that. They're the main ones, I'd say. There's plenty of others, but I don't want to bore you.
Luigi, you have co-created the Lucid Dreaming Intensive Program. What are the core objectives for this program?
There's quite a few. It's actually a bit of a misnomer. We called it Lucid Dreaming Intensive because I put it together with Thomas Hassenberger, who's a trainer in Germany. He actually lives in Thailand now. And we were at a professional division seminar about 13, 14 years ago now. And it was the first time we met. And we started talking to each other and found it out very quickly that we were both lucid dreamers. So we were sharing ideas. And Carol Sabig, who was the president of the Monroe Institute at the time, she said, "Oh, you two should put a program together." Well, we kind of laughed and we said, "Yeah, sure." And then we didn't do anything. And I remember coming back home after that because, you know, I was buzzing because of all the possibilities that we could do with the technology with the Monroe Institute. And I remember thinking, you know what, actually, that's not a bad idea. Let's put a program together. And so I wrote an email to Thomas outlining what I thought the program should be. And then shortly afterwards, he sends me like a dossier back. It was just a really massive, detailed program. And I said, yeah, let's do that one. And you know, it was actually, and it was really intensive. So that I thought, wow, this goes deep very quickly because, you know, typically with lucid dreaming programs, they just teach you techniques. How do you have a lucid dream? But what we wanted to do is something far deeper than that. Mm-hmm. And it's informed a lot by dream yoga practices, being typically the Tibetan dream yoga practices of becoming conscious through your whole day and night process. And in dream yoga, they talk about in the head and out of the head experiences. And out of the head experience will be the out of body experience. And in the head is the lucid dream, typically. But we teach how to get into the lucid dream and various techniques, you know, wake initiated, dream initiated, everything in between. But then we start to go into more of the self-exploration aspects of lucid dreaming, which is massively undercultivated. I found lucid dreaming to be a massive resource for personal development because you are inside your own psyche. And this is you. You know, yes, you can get other entering the dream sometimes, like my deceased grandmother, for instance, or others who are non-physical. That happens, but it's rare. Most of the time, what you're encountering in a lucid dream you're encountering aspects of your own psyche. And so every character, every dream situation, landscape, scenario is an aspect of yourself playing out. So we typically go into a dream with a bias from waking reality, which is I am here and there's a world of objects. But in the dream, it's a lot easier to acknowledge that you're in a subjective realm, completely subjective, and you have a perspective within that subjective realm, which is your typical body, but you are also all of that. So then I can ask in the dream, what do you represent as you're a part of me? If I dream of you, Alina, you're not Alina. You're a part of me playing the role of Alina. So why are you here in this dream now? Why do I have this perspective? And what am I trying to tell myself? So you can use it very, very psychotherapeutically. And, you know, to work out your blind spots and anything else that you might not have recognized in yourself, untapped potential. You know, is there an artist or a linguist in the dream, for instance, who can speak a language better than you do, or can create music, or and so on better than you do. Well, that's you. That's a part of yourself that maybe you haven't trained as much, that you've ignored, that you've disowned in some cases. And nightmare resolution is also another one. When people have nightmares, it's usually because they don't recognize that it's a part of themselves trying to get their attention and trying to come into wholeness. We reject the nightmare figure because it's not me and I'm running away from it or I'm attacking it. And that is a limitation, because it separates you from yourself, a part of yourself. So in the lucid dreaming program, we cover all of that, the personal development aspect in terms of how to tap into untapped potential and express it for creative problem solving, for healing, physical, emotional, and mental healing, for instance, for manifestation work even, because you can play around with the timeline to heal the past, but also project into the future a reality that you want to explore and live. So there's lots that can be explored, and we cover all of that within the program.
So there are some great benefits here. We are talking healing and personal growth. Is there any other benefits that you have noticed throughout your years of training this program, or things that would be more that would stand out, like a pattern?
Yeah, I mean, people just getting to know themselves better. You know, we've had people come to the program who have had decades, and I mean decades, of nightmares, you know, and that can be resolved within the week. In fact, it's actually quite rare when I work one-on-one as a psychotherapist with people with bad dreams and nightmares that it takes more than 2 sessions to resolve it. You know, it's really rare for that to happen, because once you really recognize and really know through direct experience that every part of the dream is a part of yourself, then it's a lot easier to extend empathy, and it's a lot easier to move out of the victim, rescuer, persecutor kind of drama triangle that we often have in nightmares, and various things in our reality. One of the things that I find really, really powerful with lucid dreaming is being able to rehearse things. Rehearse conversations, rehearse situations. Like when I'm talking on a stage with, you know, it could be hundreds of people, I can practice that scenario in a dream, in a lucid dream, and therefore I get more of a comfort, a confidence in being able to do that when I next then actually do it in the physical world. I've rehearsed it, and so I feel calmer, and that's already one thing. I had I wouldn't say like an arachnophobia, but a great disliking of spiders. And then I had one dream where there was a spider on the table, and I found myself recoiling. But then I also realized that I was dreaming. So I put my hand on the table and I let this spider crawl onto my hand, and it felt super real. And I thought, okay, I'm comfortable with this, and I'll take some of the emotion out of it, because you can turn the dial down. And then the spider started to kind of, and this was really creepy actually, but it started to kind of burrow into my palm, like dig into my palm, and it felt a bit weird. But I didn't feel scared or anything. I just thought, this is weird. And then it kind of just blended with me. And I got this immediate metaphorical recognition and awareness that, of course, the spider is a part of me. You know, this was the metaphor. And I woke up, and it was the middle of the night, and I went to the bathroom, and I turned the light on, which I normally don't do. And on the wall, there was a spider, you know, as if it had just been planted there by the universe to test. And I just felt elated. I felt this euphoria, which was actually disproportionate. It was really weird to have such an exhalation of observing the spider. But I thought, this is a wonderful opportunity to test out what I've just done in the dream. So I went over to the spider and I started stroking it. It's just pinned against the wall, you know, probably terrified. So what's this weird guy doing in the middle of the night? And I'm patting this spider, and I thought, I'm not afraid of it. I'm not concerned. So that one dream probably lasted about a minute. the whole sequence, getting rid of something that had bothered me for years. So this is something that people can train out phobias. Charlie Morley, a friend of mine who written several books on lucid dreaming, teaches it all over the place. Lovely guy. He did a study with people with PTSD, teaching them lucid dreaming, and it was amazingly high. It was something like, I can't remember what it was, something like 96% or 93, 96%. It was very high in the 90s anyway, of the people who had undergone this training at the end of the process no longer reported PTSD symptoms. I mean, can you believe that? Find a single therapy, find a single medication that can give you a 90 something percent recovery rate on PTSD. I mean, it's just amazing. And I think it was only like something like a 6-week protocol or something like that. We're not talking years of training. We're talking weeks, a couple of months max. So it's a very, very quick way of rewiring yourself, because your brain, when you're lucid, when you know that you're dreaming, your brain doesn't distinguish that reality from physical reality. It thinks it's real because it is.
I was going to ask you this, if this has anything to do with the fact that our brain does not recognize the difference between imagination and reality if we play a scenario into our dream or into our imagination.
There's a difference. I mean, there's levels of imagination, and you can be more and more present within your imagination. And so when imagination is very heightened, which would be the case in a dream, and specifically in a lucid dream, then your brain doesn't distinguish the difference between physical and non-physical realities. And therefore, whatever you train then in the dream is real to you. And this is also very, very useful therapeutically. If, for instance, I've worked with people who might have had a very difficult relationship with somebody in their family, but that person might have died. And so they didn't have any chance to, they didn't have any chance for closure. And yet in the dream, they can call up that person and have that conversation, clear the unfinished business, and wake up and find that it's gone. That they're no longer feeling that intensity, that tightness, that depression, that anxiety, whatever it was, that frustration at not being able to express themselves properly with that person. And, some of you might be asking, well, surely you've just made all that up, so why does it matter? Well, think of everything that people experience in depression and anxiety. I mean, that's all made up. It isn't useful to tell somebody that's experiencing anxiety that it's their imagination, but it is. Imagination of the future is what's taking place in anxiety. Otherwise, you have a fight or flight system, in which case it's appropriate. But what's typically happening in anxiety is that you're imagining that something's going to happen in the future that isn't what you want, and is going to cause a disaster of some kind, potentially. And then you're stressing in this moment in time. So your adrenaline and cortisol increases, you're not digesting properly, your heart rate's increased, you're sweating more, whatever it is, it's actually a physical experience that you're having because of your imagination, or in response to your imagination. So here we're using that same mechanism, but positively. Why not use it for something that would actually reduce your anxiety, tension, depression, all of that, so that physically you could be a lot calmer, mentally you could be a lot calmer, emotionally you can be a lot calmer as well. So it's a wonderful training process.
How about manifesting things? Can we, there are people who would like to manifest a certain thing in this reality. Can they try this method and just create that thing into a lucid dreaming or in an out-of-body experience to help them accelerate the thing that they would like to manifest?
This is a very big question. because manifestation isn't just wishful thinking.
Mm-hmm.
You typically you get what you resonate with. It's not about the law of attraction. It's about the law of resonance. And so this means that if you're constantly wanting things, then you'll just keep wanting things. There's a subtlety to feeling into and aligning with a way of being that has whatever it is that you're trying to bring into your existence, into your physical reality. So you have to go beyond the thing that you think you want to possibly the need behind that. And what it tells you about yourself and how much it aligns with who you want to be as a person. So it's a very complicated process. So if I want a new car, do I really want a new car? Or do I have a story about what it would be like if I had that new car? So if I had that new car, I'd have more freedom of movement and I could go visit places and enjoy myself more or whatever it is. So the car then is actually just a part of the process. So I can tune into the energy of that freedom and the enjoyment. And that is what I need to resonate with. And then I might get it through having a new car, but I might also get a motorbike. Or I might have somebody who suddenly appears in my life who has a car who drives me around all over the place. It doesn't really matter then. There could be something else that shows up, but you're tuning into. So think in terms of frequency, vibration, energy, as Tesla said. That's what we're aligning with. So you can amplify that massively in the dream world, because if there's something that you're reacting to in the dream, then you can maybe rehearse it a little bit and say, well, what would it be like to be living that life where I've got all the things that I think I want? Does it actually meet the need? Or do I need to change something and tweak things? So you can, through that rehearsal process, you can start to calibrate the type of life that you want to have and the type of person that you want to be in that life. And that will make it a lot more likely to happen then in this reality, because you're then creating almost like a memory imprint for it. And we tend to do things that we've done in the past. There's like an echoing of the past. So if there's a part of the past that says, this sort of thing doesn't happen to me, then that's going to interfere with your ability to manifest. So what are you choosing rather than desiring in this moment? I choose to align with this. I choose to bring this into my existence. And you can practice that in the dream. You can practice that in an outer body as well. But it's about being a more expanded version of yourself. And that can be trained, but it requires more to it than just wishful thinking.
About sound technology, what is the role of sound technology in facilitating such programs?
A great question. I mean, that's the core of what we do at the Monroe Institute. We use sound technology to help people to enter higher states of consciousness. That doesn't necessarily mean better. It just means that they're a different frequency, the higher. And it's not just your physical world experience. Mm-hmm. It's a big question because sound has been used for millennia to help people to go into different states of consciousness. And it would typically be used for some sort of initiation, a rite of passage, perhaps, a way of going beyond the typical story that people would be telling themselves, about who they are and who their community is and all that kind of stuff. You'd get direct experience through a journey of some kind. We can create those kinds of experiences or help facilitate those kinds of experiences using digital means. So at the Monroe Institute, we use primarily binaural beats, but we also use phase and frequency and amplitude modulation, 3D sound technologies to help your brain to get into particular patterns that over decades we've been able to refine as being very beneficial for different types of explorations. And we call those, for instance, the focus levels. So in Monroe speak, a different channel, rather than calling it like channel 1, channel 2, channel 3, and so on, we have like C1 consciousness, this waking reality. And then we have what we call focus 10, the state of mind awake, body asleep, where most people are not paying so much attention to the physical body. They allow it to move into the background while they pay more attention to whatever's going on beyond the physical. That has a particular frequency combination that we can create with sound that are played through headphones typically, and that help your brain waves to get into that configuration. And we can evidence that with EEGs, so electroencephalograms. We're actually about to launch a major study on this as well. So we can evidence it and we can entrain it. And the sound helps to hold the state open long enough for you to be able to then go and experience whatever it is that you want to experience based on whatever your intention is.
Is this a natural process, what is happening? So the brain is having a certain reaction, so then the brain waves would change according to the sound that you hear. Is this a natural process, or is there anything that is out of the natural way that the brain functions?
Well, it's all within the capacity of the brain. So it's all within the natural capacity of the brain, but it's not something that your brain would typically do without some assistance. So it's the analogy often used at the Institute is like learning to ride a bike, and we're using the stabilizers or the training wheels. You can learn to balance, but these are like a support structure to help you to keep that balance so you don't fall over. And then over time, your brain gets it and does it naturally, without the facilitation. But it's somewhere in between. It's not forcing your brain to do anything. It's not a drug. It's not an invasive technology. This is why I like to use this. Very popular right now in the mainstream is a whole psychedelic movement, right? You're probably aware of this, even in Romania. In the UK, we have a lot of studies coming out for using psychedelics to treat treatment-resistant depression, anxieties, and so on. And so suddenly psychedelics are becoming very interesting and powerful. No longer are we thinking in terms of hallucinations and delusions are always bad for you. Actually, in the right context, supported by maybe medics and people who know the territory, it's possible to use these tools to be able to do something that is positive to the person suffering from anxiety, depression, and so on. The problem with psychedelics is that they are invasive. And once you take a psychedelic, the legal arguments aside, because that will change over time, but the psychedelic kicks open a door. And while the door is open and it's been kicked open, your brain has to function with the psychedelic, and there's no way back. If the trip lasts for 10 minutes, you're stuck there for 10 minutes. That's going to happen. And hopefully that's a positive experience. Some people would have negative experiences. It's mostly positive if you set it up right. With this technology, with the sound technology, it's not like a drug. You can still get the same benefits that you get on those psychedelics, but using sound. If you don't like something, take the headphones off. Simple as that.
You control it. You can control it.
You control a lot to a large degree. You control it. You don't like something, open your eyes. That'll usually break the experience. You can't do that on LSD. Now, I don't want to knock those processes. I think they're doing some wonderful work. But what I want to highlight is that there are these tools that are really accessible. We've got not just through the Monroe Institute programs, we have the Expand app, we have YouTube channels and so on. These tools are so accessible and they're drug-free. It's not going to create dependencies. It's not going to work only when you're taking the substance, listening to the track. Your brain will learn, you don't learn how to get into altered states by taking LSD. You have to retrain yourself in other ways. The pathways through these processes with the sound technology help you to be in the driving seat so that you know how to get into these states of consciousness when you choose to do it. Might not happen all the time, so it's not as maybe consistent as taking a psychedelic, but when you get into it, then you have far more freedom of movement. So when you're in these expanded states of consciousness, you have more choice about what happens in those experiences than you would do on a psychedelic. So I think it's a wonderful space to be in, and so easy to practice, because you just need headphones and 30 minutes of undisturbed time, and anybody can really do that if they wanted to.
Yes. You have mentioned altered states of consciousness, but you also mentioned higher states of consciousness or expanded states of consciousness. For those who don't know what we are talking about expanded states, could you briefly describe, like for a beginner in consciousness exploration, why these states are higher or expanded? What does this mean?
Okay, great question. For me, it comes to going beyond. So Bob Monroe talked about out-of-body experiences, and he says you are more than your physical body. You're more than your physical perceptions. And that's the start of an affirmation that he has at the beginning of the Gateway program. You are more than your physical body. And what we add to that, really, what I certainly add to that, is you are more than the story that you tell yourself about yourself and that others have told you about yourself, that maybe you've been conditioned to believe. And we're so obsessed with our physical reality because we think we're this, and that's fine. Include this. It's great to be in a body. All of your physical world experiences are coming through this body. So honor it, look after it, and play as much as you can in it. The expanded states of consciousness include parts of yourself that maybe are not your physical body, that are the analogy I like to use is like being on a ship, and this version of you is the captain behind the wheel. So this is where you do your steering and operation in this reality. But we can expand then into maybe more of a broader perspective. And this is like getting into the crow's nest. The crow's nest can see more and further and can inform and guide. It doesn't do the steering. That's your job in this reality. But the crow's nest view allows you a bigger picture view of what reality is, what your purpose is, what meaning you assign to life, and so on. And this is what I refer to as the expanded states, or the higher states of consciousness. The crow's nest certainly is higher, but because it has a broader perspective. Doesn't mean it's better, because you can't steer a ship from there. So it's including more of your story, or expanding more of your story to include more of yourself, so that then when you come back into this reality, you are informed by that, and you have more possibilities, more free will to explore, because you've been able to train it from saying, what other options are available to me? And that's not obvious. But if you think about, people who have used, say, dreams to invent things, like Kekulé with the structure of benzene, or, Salvador Dali with his paintings, and Thomas Edison, and so on. These were people who cultivated essentially the hypnagogic state, that in between waking and dreaming territory, to invent, to create. So they're tapping into more of themselves because they're going into these more rarefied borderland states. And then when they come back to this reality, they test it out. They paint it, they create an invention of some kind, and so on. So this is what I'm. I mean, obviously, there's a lot more to it than this, but just as a broad brush, sort of talking about as your expanded self. You're more than your physical body. You're more than your identity, your personality, and you can experience that directly through meditation, essentially.
Mm-hmm. So when we say that the state is higher state of consciousness, it is like knowing ourselves from a higher perspective, and also this could help us solve a problem. For instance, if we are stuck into blockage or into a certain situation and we cannot find a solution for it, then we could access what we call a higher state and find a better solution in a higher state.
Yeah, very much so. You can find more possibilities. Mm-hmm. Because it's like what I was saying about with therapy. Sometimes we can get stuck in anxieties, and we think, well, this is what happened before, so that's going to happen again. And how do I get out of that? Well, I've tried this, I've tried that, and nothing works. Well, you might have tried only 2 or 3 things. When you go into that broader perspective, that higher perspective, you might find creative solutions that you hadn't even thought about consciously. And that can be very, very helpful. Try it out, try out the solution, rehearse it like in a dream. You say, okay, well, what would happen if I said this to my boss on Monday? What would that feel like? Can I carry the energy of that? And your dream can method act beautifully. It could create your boss very, very easily. So, and the reaction that your boss might have to whatever you're saying can be recreated very easily. So it's actually going to be pretty accurate when you rehearse something in a dream or in an out-of-body experience even. So this is, we're opening up realms of possibilities for your mind. If you're saying, oh, that doesn't work for me, why not? How do you know? How do you really know? Well, it didn't. I tried that a few years ago and it didn't work. Well, that was a few years ago. You're different now. Every 8 years, you're a different physical body, actually. Every 8 years, every cell of your body's changed. Mm-hmm. So, you're changing all the time. So something that didn't work in the past might work in the future. And you can experiment with that. You can try that in this imagined realm, because imagined in the sense that you're using your subjective experience in order to access it. You can do that very effectively in these expanded states of consciousness.
How does neuroscience support the practices of out-of-body or lucid dreaming journeys?
In the mainstream, not very much. It tries to dismiss them. Now, in terms of lucid dreams, there's a lot more, I say, evidential data from neuroscience, especially fMRI studies that show that certain areas of the brain, especially the right dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, for those of you that are interested, tends to switch on when it's been offline during typical dreams. So there can be training practices, specifically kind of like mindfulness types of practices that can help to bring those areas online. There is a neuroplasticity that takes place here, a training. So you don't just listen to one track and think, okay, I've changed something. If you spend 30 years cultivating a practice in the opposite direction, then just give it a bit. You might need to have a few more goals than just one 30-minute session. Because you're rewiring your brain. And, some studies show that 8 weeks of mindfulness meditation, this is without any technology supporting it, shows structural changes in the frontal areas of your brain, ones that are typically involved in cognition, in self-reflective awareness, in critical thinking. So, these areas are strengthened and become denser through mindfulness training. So with what we're doing here, we're accelerating that a little bit. And one of the things that we're doing in the new study that's about to launch is showing how we can entrain these frequencies in a very broad population. And that actually, once you're in these states, that you can get into them even more effectively and train that, and that your brain will learn over time to be able to get into them without these configurations, without the use of the technology. So you've learned to do it. And so that is something that neuroscience is catching up on. And I think there's going to be a lot more coming out. But typically in terms of the states themselves, there's very little that I would say, despite a lot of claims out there, that neuroscience can really say about the nature of the experiences, other than saying that it's something going on in the temporal parietal junction of the brain, or something to do with body image creation or dissolution and so on. Those centers of the brain are implicated, but why that experience for that individual now? Why are they having a connection with a deceased relative? Why are they meeting guides? Why are they having spontaneous healing of something that's bothered them for a long time? I mean, it has very little to say. But hopefully one day, hopefully the research will go there one day. But it's still not mainstream enough for people to be really looking at this in the way that it should be getting.
Are there any researches going on at the Monroe Institute right now? So we know there is a professional division which is
Yes.
conducting a few such projects.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of research studies going on at the moment. So, I mean, other than the one that I told you about, or just briefly mentioned, where we're in training the focus levels, there's one where we've been doing some EEGs analyses on and in sleep. Whether we can help people to sleep more effectively and rest more deeply through our technologies. So driving those kind of delta pulses and entering those deeper states of replenishing sleep better, which is a massive problem actually globally. There's a copper wall experiment, so people being able to adjust their frequencies or the electrical charge of their body when they go into different states of consciousness. I think that's pretty fascinating. This was something that I think Elmer Green was doing back in the, I want to say 70s, but that's pretty much in a data analysis stage at the moment. We've moved into a peer review stage, a study that is on psychokinesis, influencing matter, and this is using a multi-sensor psychokinesis detector under controlled conditions. So this is using, I think it's in collaboration with the University of Virginia, and analyzing about 3 years worth of sessions within the MC squared program. So this is about manifestation and creation in particular, and they do things like spoon bending and growing seeds with your hand and lighting up bulbs and so on, but a lot of healing and heightened energy work in that. There's another study, so you can see we're busy. There's another study about brain synchronization between a healer and a healee. So what we're seeing in that one, so we've done we're in the process of doing the data analysis and write-up. We've collected the data, but this is essentially a pilot study of assessing what happens in the brainwaves between somebody who's sending distant healing and somebody who's receiving it. And what we're already seeing is that there's a synchronization of their brainwaves. And that's really interesting. When they're in sync, there's more healing connection going on there. So there's spikes in the data. And then, we've got loads of EEG data from our discovery program or the superconscious mind programs. The discovery program's been going for quite a while, but I think we've been collecting this data from 2017, I think, something like that. So we've got quite a lot of data to analyze. Hopefully we'll be able to streamline that a little bit and make that paper see the light of day soon. But those are just some of the studies that we're doing. I'm sure our research team would be able to say a few more, but we're busy, and thankfully we're busy with collaborations as well, because it's a lot to do in just one organization.
Definitely, yeah. The Monroe Institute is a really bold and courageous place, and your passion and enthusiasm is contagious. What is the role that you play today at the Monroe Institute? We know that you have been a key player in expanding around the world of this technology, the sound technologies. And right now, what do you do at the Monroe Institute?
It's a great question. I wear many hats at the Institute. Typically, I'm kind of consulting for strategy, for research, for program development, and but I'm also a member of the board. So so like research is one of my primary focuses because I'd like us to be at the forefront of being able to get out what we have learned over these years to the wider community, to the wider world, to know about these things more directly. But I also am keen to help the Institute to grow, to be seen around the world, because we have such valuable tools that people need to know about what we're doing. And in a sea of competing voices where people tend to say a lot of the same things and piggyback actually a lot on what the Institute's done. I mean, just take binaural beats and using that for educational programs. That was invented by Bob Monroe and the research team and used in the early programs, and yet you'll see a lot of spin-off binaural beat technologies now that never mention the Monroe Institute as the originator. So, I mean, you get drowned out if you don't show your face. So one of the things that I've been doing in the last, I don't know, however many years, is try to be out there and giving talks and lectures and creating programs and podcasts and all that kind of stuff to help people to know about the Monroe Institute and how they can engage personally, directly with our tools and technology, so that they can have first-hand experience that they're more than their physical bodies, and that will help them to connect more with themselves and with their immediate environment. That's kind of one of the goals of the Institute. So my role within that is to inform it and to drive it as much as possible. And there are programs that, now we're entering a different realm, really, when it comes to how people are finding out about us. And, a lot of the time we've tried to get people to know about our residential programs like Gateway. And there are many residential programs. I mean, obviously there's Gateway, but then there's like Guidelines, Lifeline, X27. I mean, a whole host of programs, OB Spectrum, Lucid Dreaming. But these are typically programs that have about 20 people maximum in them, 20, 25 people max, which is a drop in the ocean when you're looking at 8 billion people on the planet that could benefit from these tools. So one of the things that I'm looking at is how can we make these more accessible and maybe smaller, shorter, more affordable, so that people at different levels of experience, of even resource, time, can still access and benefit from these tools and techniques. So that's really what's going on right now. And one of the things, like for instance, that I completed at the end of last year, and hopefully will be released in the next sort of like 3 months or so, is the Gateway program, the Gateway Voyage program, was recorded and can be done in a self-paced way soon. So we recorded videos with the meditations, with our latest technology, that will be something that you can do in the comfort of your own home at your own pace, in a much more affordable way as well, because you don't have to pay for all the catering and travel and all that kind of stuff, staffing and so on. So this is just one of the things that I've been involved in, and much more to come. It's quite a broad role that I'm currently occupying. But thankfully, there's a big team at Monroe that can help as well. We're in a massive growth phase, so yeah, I'm quite happy that there's a supportive team there that are really excellent people.
Yes, and Monroe Institute is a world leader in consciousness exploration, and so of course that they must have an amazing team in order to keep the high standards very high, and probably also evolve in any minute, in every second. Now for closing, Luigi, do you have an advice for those that are beginners in consciousness exploration, maybe simple tools that they could use for lucid dreaming or out-of-body experiences?
Sure. The easiest thing is to get the Expand app. We designed that so that it would be entry level for a lot of people. And yes, there's a paid element to it, but there's a lot of free exercises in that as well. And all you need to do is just put an email in it when you download it, and it's in app stores. So whether it's the Google Play Store or the Apple Store, you can find it. Expand Beyond Meditation by the Monroe Institute. That would be the best place to start, because there's a lot of meditations categorized that, depending on what you're interested in, whether it's some relaxation and deepening your meditation, whether it's healing your energy work, whether it's exploring beyond the physical and dreaming and sleeping, it's all by category. So, go and have a play with that. That would be the first place that I would recommend starting. The other thing is then just have a look if there's anything going on in your local area, because we have online programs, so obviously that makes it more accessible for most people. But we have trainers all over the world. And so if you go on the Monroe Institute website and have a look at whether something is going on in your area, there could be weekend workshops, for instance, what we call the outreach workshops, going on in your area, where they take place over a Saturday and Sunday. It's a nice, simple, easy entry level. So you get the direct practice, but you do it in a group so that you get the connection with the group as well, which is quite powerful. And see if there's other events going on. I mean, I know that there's several conferences going on this year, like Alina was talking about with the professional division. There's one going on in the US at the end of the year, one in Italy. There's also an Exploring Consciousness conference going on in Romania. I think that's on the 3rd to the 5th of October, if I'm not mistaken. Yes. So in Brasov, I think. Yeah.
Brasov.
So, yeah. And I'll be there at some point in that. So, if anybody wants us to come and say hello, I'm happy to see you. But, these are really great ways to just get to know the community, because I think, sometimes meditation can be very isolating. That we learn to do this and we don't know how to talk to other people about some of these more exceptional experiences that people can have in these expanded states of consciousness. So having the ability to find a community and talk to them is incredibly powerful and not to be underestimated. It's actually part of the process of integration as well. So yeah, lots of things there. We've got a YouTube channel, Monroe Institute, that you can also check out.
Thank you, Luigi. And thank you to our audience for joining us today in this extraordinary journey with Luigi Sciambarella, which is a true pioneer in navigating consciousness. If this conversation ignited something in you and you feel called for more, do join us in October 3rd to 5th in Brasov at Aro Palace Hotel for more of this amazing experience. So until next time, remember, the greatest journey is the one within.